space, as it turns out, has a terrible sense of humor. Lieutenant Nia had exactly 3 minutes to contemplate this fact before her research vessel decided to betray her in the most spectacular fashion possible. One moment, she was running a standard mineral composition scan on an uncharted planet. Coordinates only, no fancy name, just a string of numbers that probably meant something to someone somewhere. And the next, her control panel lit up like a festival of bad news. Red lights. So many red lights. "Oh, come on," Nia muttered, her hands flying across the controls with practiced urgency. "Not today. Any day but today." The ship disagreed. Violently. A catastrophic malfunction in the primary stabilizer array, her diagnostic display cheerfully informed her, right before half the console went dark. Nia would like to point out, for the record, that this was absolutely, categorically, 100% not her fault. She hadn't touched anything she wasn't supposed to touch. Hadn't tinkered with any systems. Hadn't even thought about bypassing any safety protocols. For once, the universe apparently didn't care about her newfound sense of responsibility. Her vessel lurched sideways, artificial gravity hiccuping, and Nia's stomach did that fun thing where it tried to exit her body through her throat. Emergency protocols kicked in, which sounds reassuring until you realize emergency protocols in a failing ship mostly involve a lot of alarms and a computer voice politely informing you that you're about to die. "Emergency landing sequence initiated," the calm, feminine voice announced. "Brace for impact." "Brace for impact," Nia repeated mockingly, fighting with the manual controls. "Oh, sure. Let me just brace for slamming into an uncharted planet at terminal velocity. That'll help." But she did brace, because she wasn't stupid, and because the planet's surface was getting very, very close, very, very quickly. The jungle canopy came up to meet her like an angry green fist. Trees, massive, ancient things that had probably stood for centuries, exploded around her vessel as it tore through the upper atmosphere. Nia caught glimpses of purple bark, leaves that shimmered gold and silver, vines thick as her torso, all of it rushing past in a blur of color and noise and oh God, oh God, oh God. The impact, when it came, was somehow both better and worse than she expected. Better because she didn't immediately die. Worse because she got to experience every bone-rattling, teeth-chattering second of the crash as her ship plowed through soil and stone and vegetation before finally, mercifully, coming to a halt. Silence descended, broken only by the sound of Nia's harsh breathing and the creaking groan of stressed metal. "Still alive," she announced to no one. "Statistical anomaly. Noted." She ran a quick self-assessment. Minor cuts on her arms, bruising across her ribs where the harness had caught her. A headache that felt like someone was using her skull as a drum. But everything moved when she told it to. Nothing was broken, and she wasn't bleeding from anywhere important. All things considered, a solid landing. 10 out of 10 would crash again. Getting out of the harness took longer than it should have, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The cabin was a disaster, equipment scattered everywhere, panels hanging loose, sparks occasionally popping from exposed wiring. Nia grabbed her emergency pack from the storage locker, relieved to find it intact, and did a quick inventory. Water filtration tablets? Check. Nutrient bars that tasted like despair? Check. Medical kit? Check. Multi-tool? Check. And there, nestled in the side pocket, her personal audio voice recorder. Nia pulled it out, turning the small device over in her hands. It was old tech, practically ancient by current standards, but she preferred it to the neural interface recorders most people used. Something about speaking her thoughts out loud, hearing them played back in her own voice, helped her think. She'd been using it to log research notes, personal observations, half-formed theories about xenobiology, and the occasional rant about terrible coffee rations. The recorder's display blinked green, still functional, unlike literally everything else on her ship. "Well," Nia said, clicking the record button, "day 1 of being stranded on an uncharted planet. Ship is totaled. Communications array is, and I quote, completely gone. Emergency beacon is transmitting, but given our location on the outer rim, rescue estimate is anywhere from 2 weeks to never. Supplies are limited. Morale is questionable. But hey, at least the weather looks nice." She clicked off the recorder and opened the emergency hatch. The weather did, in fact, look nice. 2 moons hung in a sky that was transitioning from purple to deep blue. Either dawn or dusk, she couldn't tell yet. The air that rushed in was warm, humid, thick with the scent of growing things and rich soil. Alien bird song, or something close enough to birds that her brain labeled it as such, echoed through the trees. The jungle around her crash site was dense, vibrant, and absolutely teeming with life. Plants in colors that didn't exist on old Earth. Insects? She assumed they were insects that glowed with bioluminescence even in the fading light. And in the distance, carried on the humid air, the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. Several large somethings. Predators, her hindbrain supplied helpfully. Big ones. "Right," Nia said, gripping her multi-tool a little tighter. Not ominous at all. She spent the next few hours setting up a basic camp near the wreckage. Her ship was too damaged to provide shelter, but she managed to salvage some thermal sheeting and set up a lean-to structure using fallen branches and her emergency tarp. Motion sensors went up in a perimeter around the camp. Basic tech, but they'd alert her if anything large got too close. As the sky darkened completely, both moons rising to full brightness, Nia allowed herself a moment to process everything. She was alone, stranded, on a planet that probably wasn't even in the official database. Her emergency beacon was screaming into the void, but whether anyone would hear it in time was anyone's guess. She should be terrified. Instead, she found herself looking at the alien jungle with the kind of excitement that had gotten her into xenobiology in the first place. This planet was incredible. The biodiversity alone was staggering. If she had to be stranded somewhere, at least it was somewhere interesting. "Lieutenant Nia, personal log," she said into her recorder, settling into her makeshift shelter. "If I'm going to die on a paradise planet, I'm going to document every second of it. For science. And because if by some miracle someone finds this recording, they should know I faced the end with dignity and grace." She paused. "And also, a lot of sarcasm. Can't forget the sarcasm." That first night was long. Every sound made her jump. The rustling of leaves, the calls of nocturnal creatures, the occasional roar of something that sounded distinctly like an apex predator. Her motion sensors blinked peacefully, nothing tripping them, but Nia still slept in fits and starts. Morning arrived with light that filtered through the canopy in shafts of gold and green. Nia emerged from her shelter, stiff and sore, to find her camp undisturbed. She checked her sensors, ran a diagnostic on her emergency beacon, still transmitting, still unanswered, and ate a nutrient bar that tasted like sadness and artificial strawberries. Then she heard it. A sound like nothing she'd encountered before. Part chirp, part growl, part something musical. Coming from the tree line about 20 meters from her camp. Nia froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her recorder. She hit the button, whispering into it. Unknown vocalization. Pattern suggests communication rather than threat display. but I could be wrong. Very, very wrong. She turned slowly. 3 shapes emerged from the undergrowth, moving with cautious, curious steps. They were quadrupedal, roughly the size of large dogs, covered in fur that shifted colors in the morning light. Iridescent, catching the sun and reflecting it back in shades of blue and green and purple. Large eyes, dark and intelligent, set in faces that were somewhere between feline and something else entirely. Retractable claws, she noted, as one of them dug into the soft earth. Definitely predators, but young ones, cubs. "Oh," Nia breathed. "Oh, you're beautiful." The 3 cubs regarded her with equal parts wariness and fascination. The boldest of them, marked with distinctive patches of darker fur across its shoulders, took a step forward. Then another. Nia remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. She'd studied enough xenobiology to know that sudden movements were a terrible idea around predators, juvenile or not. The bold cub tilted its head, making a soft chirping sound. One of its companions, smaller and more hesitant, chirped back. A conversation. They were having a conversation. "You're talking to each other," Nia whispered into her recorder, still raised near her face. "Linguistic capability in juveniles. That's significant. That's—" The bold cub moved fast, faster than Nia could track. 1 second she was narrating, the next the recorder was gone, plucked right out of her hand by a creature with reflexes that made her look like she was moving through honey. "Hey!" Nia yelped, stumbling backward. "That's mine!" The cub landed a few meters away, the recorder clutched in its mouth. Carefully, she noticed, not crushing it. It looked at her, looked at the device, then batted at it with one paw. The other 2 cubs rushed over, all 3 of them now focused on this strange new toy. Nia's initial panic, "That's my only working tech, give it back, I need that," warred with scientific fascination. They were gentle with it, curious, treating it like something precious rather than prey. One of the cubs, the smallest, pawed at the device from a different angle. Its claw caught the playback button. Nia's own voice emerged from the small speaker, tinny but clear. "Unknown vocalization. Pattern suggests communication rather than threat display." All 3 cubs scattered like leaves in a wind, the recorder tumbling to the ground. Nia couldn't help it. She laughed. The sound seemed to confuse the cubs more than frighten them. They huddled together about 10 meters away, peering at her and the still-playing recorder with wide eyes. When the playback ended, silence returned. The cubs waited, watching. Slowly, telegraphing every movement, Nia approached the recorder. She knelt down, picked it up, checked it for damage. Still functional. Still recording, actually. She'd never clicked it off. "Subject cubs are displaying high levels of curiosity," she said softly into the device. "Response to novel stimuli is investigation rather than aggression. They scattered when they heard my voice. But they're not fleeing. They're watching. Learning." The bold cub with the distinctive patches took a tentative step toward her. Then another. Nia remained kneeling, making herself smaller, less threatening. The cub approached until it was close enough to touch, though Nia kept her hands to herself. It sniffed at her, at the recorder, making small sounds that its siblings echoed. Then, with deliberate care, it sat down, right there in front of her. And the other 2, taking their cue from their bolder sibling, crept forward and sat as well. Nia felt something crack open in her chest. Wonder. Pure, unfiltered wonder. "Hi," she whispered. "I'm Nia. I'm very lost, and you're the most amazing thing I've ever seen." The cubs chirped at her, a chorus of sounds that felt somehow like a greeting in return. The cubs, it turned out, had absolutely no respect for personal property. Nia learned this over the course of the next hour as the bold one. She'd mentally started calling it Patches because, why not? Figured out that the recorder made interesting sounds when you pressed the buttons, which it did, repeatedly, with the kind of single-minded determination that suggested intelligence, and also a complete disregard for Nia's mounting anxiety about her only functional piece of technology. Okay, no, that's the delete button. Don't press that. Oh, you absolute menace. Too late. Patches had discovered the record function. The cub made a sound directly into the recorder's microphone. A low, rumbling growl that started deep in its chest and rose into something almost melodic. Then it stopped, looked at the device, and tilted its head as if waiting for something. You want to hear it back, Nia realized. You understand cause and effect. Of course you do. She reached out slowly, and Patches allowed her to take the recorder. Nia hit playback. The cub's own growl song echoed back at it. All three cubs exploded into excited chirping. The smallest one rushed forward, nudging at the recorder with its nose, making its own sound, a series of high-pitched squeaks. Patches, generous with its new toy, stepped back. Nia recorded the squeaks, played them back. More chirping, more excitement. The third cub, quieter than the others but watching everything with sharp attention, added its own vocalization, a sound like wind through hollow reeds. "You're playin'," Nia breathed, recording and playing back each sound. "You're engaging in vocal play. This is a critical stage in linguistic development. I'm watching you learn how to use your voices." For creatures that could probably tear her apart if they wanted to, the cubs were remarkably patient with her. They took turns with the recorder, each making sounds, waiting for playback, then chattering among themselves in what Nia's trained ear recognized as genuine communication. Not just instinctive calls, actual exchange of information. When they finally got distracted by something flying overhead, a creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a floating ribbon, Nia managed to reclaim her recorder. She immediately backed up the files to her emergency pack's data storage, just in case the cubs decided the device was more fun to dismantle than use. She spent the rest of that morning observing from a respectful distance as the cubs explored her camp. They investigated everything with thorough curiosity. The thermal sheeting fascinated them. The motion sensors confused them. One of them tried to eat a nutrient bar and immediately spat it out, which, fair. "Yeah," Nia called over to the cub, making disgusted sounds. "They taste like that to me, too." Around midday, the cubs left, simply turned and trotted back into the jungle like they had somewhere to be. Nia watched them go, feeling an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Don't get attached," she told herself firmly. "They're wild animals, possibly sapient wild animals, but still." They came back the next morning, and the morning after that. By the fifth day, Nia had established what could generously be called a routine. The cubs arrived around dawn, spent several hours investigating her camp and playing with the recorder, then vanished into the jungle for the rest of the day. Sometimes they returned in the evening. Sometimes they didn't. Nia used the recorder to document everything: their vocalizations, their behavior patterns, their interactions with each other. She noted that Patches was the bold one, always first to try new things. The smallest cub was more cautious but incredibly observant, often mimicking what Patches did after watching carefully. The third cub was the mediator, stepping in when the other two got too rough with each other. Pack dynamics, social structure, tool use. They'd figured out how to operate the recorder with minimal guidance. "If I make it off this planet, Nia said into the device one evening, "and I present this research to the Xenobiology Council, they're going to think I made it up." "Oh, sure, Lieutenant. You just happened to crash on a planet with potentially sapient predator cubs who love playing with recording equipment. Very convenient." She paused, then added, "But I have recordings. Lots of recordings. Lots of recordings of growls, chirps, squeaks, and what sounded like argumentative chattering when Patches and the smallest cub disagreed about whose turn it was with the device." On the 6th day, something changed. Nia woke to find the cubs already in her camp, which was unusual. They were sitting in a semicircle around her lean-to, making soft sounds that felt almost like conversation. Checking on her. "Morning," she said, emerging from her shelter. "You're here early." Patches chirped at her. The sound was different from its usual vocalizations, more structured, almost like it was trying to shape the noise into something specific. Nia pulled out her recorder. "Say that again?" The cub obliged, making the same sound. Nia played it back, then, on a hunch, said into the recorder, "Good morning." She played that back, too. All 3 cubs went very, very still, listening with an intensity that made Nia's heart race. She said it again, slower. "Good morning." Patches opened its mouth. What came out was a garbled mess of sounds that were clearly an attempt to mimic her words. Not successful, but the intent was unmistakable. "Oh my!" Nia fumbled with the recorder. "You're trying to talk. You're trying to speak human." She spent the next 2 hours working with them. Simple words, basic sounds. "Hello?" "Yes." "No." The cubs couldn't produce all the phonemes. Their vocal anatomy was different, but they tried. They listened to her recordings, listened to their own attempts, adjusted, and tried again. The learning curve was staggering. On the 8th day, Patches brought her breakfast. Nia woke to find a dead animal, something rabbit-adjacent, laid carefully at the entrance to her shelter. The cubs sat nearby, watching her expectantly. "Oh," Nia said, staring at the offering. "Oh, you think I can't hunt?" The smallest cub chirped, nudging the dead creature toward her. "You're taking care of me," Nia whispered, something warm and overwhelming rising in her chest. "You think I'm part of your pack." She didn't eat the rabbit thing, couldn't, without knowing if it was safe for human consumption. But she made a show of appreciation. The cubs seemed satisfied. They brought her food every day after that. Fresh kills, usually small creatures, always placed with care. Nia started accepting them, storing what she could analyze later, and supplementing her diet with edible plants she'd identified as safe through careful testing. She was being adopted by alien predator cubs. This was either the best or worst thing that had ever happened to her. On the 12th day, Nia woke to find her recorder missing. Again. But this time, the cubs were gone too. Panic set in immediately. That recorder had weeks of data, irreplaceable observations, evidence of first contact with a potentially sapient species. She checked her motion sensors, following the alert pings that showed the cubs' exit path. They'd gone deeper into the jungle, toward an area her sensors couldn't reach. Nia grabbed her multi-tool and followed. The jungle was denser here, the canopy so thick that only scattered beams of light penetrated. Nia pushed through undergrowth, following broken branches and disturbed soil. She could hear the cubs ahead, their distinctive chirps and calls. And then she heard something else, a deeper sound. Adult sound. Nia froze, suddenly aware that she was tracking 3 predator cubs into unknown territory. And cubs usually had parents, and parents of species that could take down prey were generally not thrilled about strange aliens following their offspring. This was a terrible idea, she whispered to herself. This was monumentally stupid. But the recorder. She needed that recorder. She crept forward, moving as quietly as possible until she reached the edge of a clearing, and stopped breathing entirely. The cubs were there, playing near an enormous hollowed tree, and beside them, watching with calm intelligence, was the largest predator Nia had ever seen in person. Easily 3 times her size. Iridescent fur matted with scars, muscles that moved like liquid steel under its pelt. The same species as the cubs, but mature, battle-tested, and absolutely capable of ending Nia's existence with casual efficiency. The parent. And it was holding her voice recorder between its front paws, listening to the playback. Listening to its cub's voice chirping, "Hello." Time stopped being a thing Nia understood. She stood at the edge of the clearing, rooted to the spot like one of the massive trees around her, while her brain tried very hard to process what she was seeing. The parent, because what else could it be, had the recorder positioned carefully between its paws, treating the small device with a delicacy that seemed impossible for something that large and that clearly dangerous. The recording played again, Patches's voice, high and uncertain, forming the shape of a human word. Low. The parent's ears, which Nia only now noticed could rotate independently, swiveled forward, focused entirely on the sound. Then those intelligent eyes lifted and locked directly onto Nia. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run, to back away slowly, to not make eye contact, to become very small and very uninteresting. But her scientific training, the part of her brain that had gotten her into xenobiology in the first place, whispered something else entirely. That's not aggression. That's assessment. The parent made a sound, low, resonant, complex. A sentence, Nia's pattern recognition cortex insisted. That was grammatical structure. Subject, verb, probably an interrogative marker at the end. It was asking a question. "I don't speak your language," Nia said quietly, her voice shaking only slightly. "But I wish I did." The cubs, who had stopped playing the moment their parent looked up, turned to stare at Nia. Patches chirped excitedly, bounding over to her and then back to the parent, like it was trying to introduce them. "Look, parent, it's the weird furless thing that makes sounds and gives us the toy and can't hunt." The parent watched this display, then did something Nia absolutely did not expect. It pushed the recorder toward her, gently, deliberately, an offering, or maybe a test. Nia's legs decided to start working again. She moved forward slowly, telegraphing every motion, hands visible and empty, except for the multi-tool on her belt, which she very carefully did not reach for. Each step felt like it took an eternity. The parent watched her approach with unwavering attention, but made no aggressive moves. When Nia was close enough to touch the recorder, she knelt down. Eye level with the parent was still eye level with a creature that could bite her head off. But something about the posture felt right. Less threatening. More respectful. She picked up the recorder. The parent's eyes tracked the movement. "Thank you," Nia said softly. Then, because she was apparently committed to this absolutely unhinged course of action, she held the recorder between them and clicked record. "My name is Nia. I'm a human. I crashed here. Your cubs, they've been visiting me. They're incredible. They're learning to speak." She clicked playback. The parent listened to every word with focused intensity. When the recording ended, it made another complex vocalization. Different pattern from the first. Statement rather than question, Nia thought. On impulse, she recorded it, played it back. The parent's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Its ears perked forward, head tilting in what read as surprise across every species Nia had ever studied. It made the sound again, slightly different this time, adjusting, listening to how it sounded when played back. "You understand," Nia breathed. "You understand what the recorder does. You understand recording and playback and linguistic analysis." The smallest cub chose that moment to toddle over and flop directly onto Nia's lap, making a contented chirping sound. Nia froze, but the parent simply watched, making no move to intervene. Permission, she realized. The parent was giving permission for its cub to interact with her. Nia carefully, reverently, placed one hand on the cub's back. Its fur was impossibly soft, the iridescent quality even more pronounced up close. The cub leaned into the touch, purring, a sound that vibrated through its whole body. "Okay," Nia said, her voice thick with emotion she hadn't expected. "Okay, we're doing this. We're actually doing this." She spent the next hour in that clearing, using the recorder as a translation bridge. It was crude, imperfect, limited by the fact that she was working with sound alone and had no reference for what any of the vocalizations meant. But patterns emerged. The parent would make a sound. Nia would record it, play it back. Sometimes the parent would repeat it with variations, like demonstrating different inflections. Sometimes it would gesture to something, a cub, a tree, the sky, while making specific sounds. Nouns, Nia catalogued frantically in her head. Verbs, possibly tense markers, though I can't be sure. When the parent gestured to itself and made a particular sound, Ralmisha, or as close as Nia's human phonemes could approximate, she understood. A name. "Ralmisha," she repeated carefully into the recorder, then played it back. The parent, Ralmisha, made a sound that could only be described as approval, then gestured to Nia expectantly. "Nia," she said, pointing to herself. "I'm Nia." Ralmisha attempted it. What came out was closer to Nia, but the intent was clear. The cubs, excited by this exchange, started chirping Nia's name too, each with their own variation. Nia laughed, and the sound seemed to please all of them. Through careful observation and deduction, Nia began piecing together information. Ralmisha was alone with the three cubs. No other adults. The specific vocalization Ralmisha used when referring to another adult, accompanied by a gesture to the empty space beside itself, carried what Nia's linguistic training recognized as past tense and finality. A widowed parent, raising three cubs alone. The territorial calls Nia had heard from the jungle over the past 2 weeks suddenly made more sense. Ralmisha warning other predators away, protecting vulnerable young without a partner to help defend them. And then this strange, weak, furless creature had crashed nearby. This creature that the cubs had adopted as their strange, incompetent sibling who couldn't hunt but made interesting sounds. Ralmisha had been watching, assessing, deciding if Nia was a threat to the cubs or just odd. "I'm not a threat," Nia said, recording her words. "I would never hurt them. They're extraordinary. You're all extraordinary." Ralmisha listened to the playback, head tilted, then made a vocalization that sounded almost gentle, reached out one massive paw, and, with impossible care, touched Nia's shoulder. Contact. Acceptance. Nia's eyes burned with tears she absolutely was not going to shed in front of a predator who might interpret crying as weakness or distress. She recorded Ralmisha's vocalization, the one that had accompanied the gesture, and filed it away mentally as something like safe, or family, or pack. The cubs, taking this as permission for chaos, immediately swarmed Nia. all three of them, climbing on her, chirping, purring, demanding attention. Nia went down under the pile of iridescent fur and enthusiastic affection, laughing helplessly. Ralmisha watched with what Nia would swear was amusement. That clearing became their meeting place. Every day, Nia would make the trek from her camp, and Ralmisha would be there with the cubs. They established a routine built around the recorder. Nia would teach the cubs human words, simple ones they could approximate. Ralmisha would demonstrate their own language, patient with Nia's clumsy attempts to reproduce the sounds. The cubs were learning faster than Nia. Their vocal flexibility was greater, their pattern recognition sharper. Patches mastered Nia and hello within 2 days. Food and play came next. The smallest cub, who Nia had started thinking of as Chirp for its distinctive call, learned safe and home. The third cub, the quiet observer, surprised everyone by being the first to string 2 words together. Nia, friend. Nia had to sit down when that happened, overwhelmed by the weight of it. First contact. Real, genuine first contact. And it was happening through the voice of a cub who barely came up to her waist. Ralmisha seemed pleased by the cub's progress. Would make encouraging sounds when they got a word right, corrective ones when they struggled. Would demonstrate for Nia what the cubs were trying to say in their own language. One afternoon, while the cubs napped in a pile of fur and contentment, Nia and Ralmisha sat together in companionable silence. Nia played through some of the recordings, the progression from those first chaotic growls and chirps to increasingly clear attempts at cross-species communication. Ralmisha made a sound, soft, contemplative. Nia recorded it, played it back, and understood somehow that it meant something like thank you, or gratitude, or you have given my cubs something precious. You gave me something too, Nia said quietly. You gave me a family when I was alone. You gave me the most important discovery of my career, maybe my entire life. You gave me hope. She didn't know if Ralmisha understood the words, but when the massive predator leaned against her shoulder, warm and solid and trusting, Nia thought maybe understanding went deeper than language. 2 weeks and 3 days after the crash, Nia's emergency beacon finally got an answer. She was in the clearing with Ralmisha and the cubs when her wrist comm, silent for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed, chirped to life. All 4 aliens startled at the sound, the cubs immediately moving to flank Nia, while Ralmisha rose to a defensive stance. It's okay, Nia said quickly, raising her free hand in the calming gesture they'd established. It's okay. It's my people. They heard my distress call. She triggered the comm. Static crackled, then resolved into a voice. Urgency beacon detected. This is Captain Nix Lorraine of the rescue vessel Meridian. If anyone can hear this transmission, please respond. Repeat. We have located your emergency beacon. This is Lieutenant Nia, she said into the comm, her voice catching. I'm alive. I crashed on the planet's surface. I'm relatively unharmed. A pause. Then, Lieutenant, thank God. We're beginning surface scans now. Sit tight. We'll have a team to your location within the hour. What's your status? Nia looked at Ralmisha, at the 3 cubs who had made her camp their second home, at the recorder in her hand that contained proof of everything that had happened here. It's complicated, she said. Captain Nix Lorraine struck Nia as someone who had seen enough in her career that very little surprised her anymore. But when she emerged from the rescue shuttle with her team, 4 crew members, all armed, all scanning the area with practiced caution, and found Nia sitting calmly in her camp with 3 large predator cubs lounging around her like oversized house cats. Surprise definitely registered. "Lieutenant," Captain Lorraine said carefully, her hand resting on her sidearm but not drawing it, "step away from the animals slowly. Don't make any sudden movements." "They're not animals," Nia said, not moving. "Well, technically they are, but not in the way you mean. They're people, sapient. And if you draw that weapon, their parent is going to be very unhappy." "They're what now?" As if summoned, and given how attuned Ralmisha was to anything involving the cubs, maybe summoned was accurate, the massive predator emerged from the tree line. 3 of the rescue team members immediately raised their weapons. Captain Lorraine's hand tightened on her sidearm. Patches, protective and brave and absolutely not reading the room, bounded toward Nia, chirping, "Nia friend, Nia safe," in human speech. Garbled, high-pitched, but unmistakably human words from an alien throat. The rescue team froze. "Everyone lower your weapons," Captain Lorraine ordered quietly, her eyes never leaving Ralmisha. Slowly. "Lieutenant Nia, what exactly is happening here?" Nia stood, moving to place herself between the armed humans and her adopted family. It was possibly the stupidest tactical decision she'd ever made, but the thought of Ralmisha or the cubs getting hurt made her chest tight with panic. "First contact," she said simply. "I made first contact with an intelligent species. The cubs have been visiting me since the crash. They learned to use my voice recorder. They started mimicking human speech. And their parent, Ralmisha, has been teaching me their language in return." She held up the recorder like it was proof. Evidence. Everything. "You're telling me," Captain Lorraine said slowly, "that you crashed on an uncharted planet, got adopted by predators, and have been conducting linguistic research for 2 weeks. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "Lieutenant, it sounds ridiculous no matter how I say it." Ralmisha, who had been watching this exchange with sharp attention, made a vocalization. Complex, structured, directed at Captain Lorraine. A question Nia knew from experience. "Ralmisha wants to know if you're a threat," Nia translated, "or if you're pack, family. The cubs are scared, and Ralmisha is trying to assess the situation." Captain Lorraine looked at Nia, at the cubs, who had indeed moved to huddle together, watching the armed humans with wide eyes, at Ralmisha, whose posture read as protective rather than aggressive to anyone who knew what to look for. "Tell Ralmisha," the captain said carefully, "that we're here to take you home, not to hurt anyone." Nia pulled up a recording she'd made the previous day. Ralmisha teaching her the word for journey, or travel, or leaving. The cubs had gotten upset when Nia tried to learn it, like they understood what it meant. She played it, then recorded her own message. "Nia go. Sky home. No hurt. Safe." The vocabulary was limited, the grammar probably atrocious, but Ralmisha understood. The massive predator's ears flattened, a sign of distress Nia had learned meant sadness rather than anger. Chirp, the smallest cub, made a sound like breaking. The quiet observer cub pressed against Ralmisha's leg, and Patches, bold, wonderful Patches, walked right up to Nia and said, clear as day, "No go." Captain Lorraine made a sound that might have been a suppressed gasp. One of her team members actually lowered his weapon entirely, staring. "I have to," Nia said, kneeling down to Patches's eye level. Her vision blurred with tears she couldn't stop this time. "I have to go back. But I'm going to make sure your home is protected. I'm going to make sure no one hurts you or your family. I promise." She didn't know if Patches understood all the words, but the cub pressed its head against her chest, purring sadly, and Nia wrapped her arms around iridescent fur and let herself cry. The next hour was chaos of the bureaucratic kind. Captain Lorraine called up to the Meridian, spoke in urgent tones about first contact protocols and protected status, and getting the Xenobiology Council involved immediately. Her team maintained a respectful distance from Ralmisha and the cubs, though Nia caught several of them recording footage on their personal devices. Evidence? Proof? This was real. It had happened, and the galaxy was about to change. Nia gathered her meager belongings, backed up the recorder's data to the rescue team's systems, and tried very hard not to look at the cubs watching her with confused, sad eyes. "Lieutenant," Captain Lorraine said quietly, approaching while her team did final equipment checks, "I need to ask, are you certain about the sapience claim? Because if we classify this planet as inhabited by intelligent life, that's protection under the Accord. No colonization, no resource extraction, no contact without explicit permission from the inhabitants. That's a significant designation." "I've never been more certain of anything," Nia said. She pulled out her recorder, the original, the one that had started everything. "Listen." She played the recordings. Not all of them, that would take hours, but a curated selection. The first chaotic captures of growls and chirps. The progression as the cubs learned cause and effect with the playback function. Their first attempts at mimicry. Ralmisha's complex grammatical structures. The cubs' steady improvement with human words. And finally, from just that morning, patches saying, "Nia teach, we learn, friends." Captain Lorraine listened to all of it in silence. When the final recording ended, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Protected status," she said. "I'll personally ensure the paperwork goes through. This planet is off limits to everyone except authorized research personnel, which I'm guessing you'll be heading up." "If they'll have me," Nia said, looking at Ralmisha. The captain followed her gaze. "You really care about them." "They saved me," Nia said simply. "Not just from being alone. They gave me purpose. They trusted me when they had no reason to. They're family." "Then we make sure they're protected," Captain Lorraine said. "Come on. Let's get you home so you can start the process of coming back." The goodbyes were harder than Nia expected. The quiet cub pushed its head under her hand one last time. Chirp made sounds that needed no translation. Sadness, confusion, don't leave. And Patches, stubborn and brave, tried to follow her to the shuttle until Ralmisha called it back with a firm vocalization. Nia knelt one final time in front of Ralmisha, this magnificent creature who had chosen to trust her instead of seeing her as a threat. "I'm coming back," she said into the recorder, then played it. "I promise. I'm going to learn your language properly. I'm going to tell other humans about you, about how incredible you are. And I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts your family." Ralmisha leaned down, touched its forehead to Nia's in a gesture they'd developed over the past weeks. Contact, trust, pack. Then, in a voice that struggled with human phonemes, but managed anyway, Ralmisha said, "Come back." 2 words, in Nia's language. The first words the parent had spoken in human speech, saved for this moment. Nia's composure shattered completely. She wrapped her arms around Ralmisha's massive neck and sobbed, while 3 confused cubs chirped questions, and Captain Lorraine quietly told her team to give them a minute. Aboard the Meridian, with the planet shrinking in the viewport, Nia sat in the medical bay, while a doctor checked her over and pronounced her surprisingly healthy for someone who'd been stranded for over 2 weeks. Captain Lorraine found her there an hour later, staring at her recorder. "Playing them back?" the captain asked gently. 6,000 recordings, Nia said. Growls, chirps, squeaks, playful chaos, attempts at human speech, conversations in a language I'm only beginning to understand. And scattered through all of it, the sound of first contact happening one word at a time. She looked up at the captain. "I just changed everything, didn't I?" "No," Captain Lorraine said, sitting down beside her. "They did. You just pushed the record button." Nia smiled, tears still tracking down her face. She pulled up the most recent recording, the one from right before she left. Patches's voice, getting stronger with each word. "Come back, Nia. Promise. Come back." "I will," she whispered to the recording, to the memory, to the family waiting for her on a planet that now had protection under every law humanity recognized. "I promise." 3 months later, Lieutenant Nia returned to the planet that no longer had just coordinates, but a name. Haven, she'd called it in her official report, and the name had stuck. She arrived not as a crashed pilot, but as the head of the First Contact Linguistic Research Team, with authority to establish peaceful relations with the indigenous sapient species. The cubs were bigger now, their fur losing some of its juvenile patterns. But when they heard her voice calling from the research camp, all three came running, chirping and growling and shouting, "Nia! Nia! Nia!" in voices that had gotten so much better at human speech. And Ralmisha, wise and patient, touched foreheads with her and said, "Welcome home." Nia pulled out a new recorder, top of the line with better audio quality and more storage, and smiled. "Let's see what we can teach each other," she said. And she pressed record.